Spring it on with 40 to 70% off almost everything at Gap Factory and gapfactory.com. Matching styles for the family are on sale too. Shop it all through April 12th.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. Dan, we are inching ever so close to the start of training camp. We're on July 8th. Training camp starts on July 27th. And it still feels like training camp is 3 months away. I don't.
Like Groundhog Day.
This is what I've been talking about. This is why I hate this time of the season. This truly is the purgatory where the days just feel like weeks. And it's just amazing. It's literally, 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks at most until training camp starts?
So close.
And I feel like there's so much stuff in between that period of time until we get there. I hate this part of the season.
Yeah, it feels like it's going so slow. It feels kind of like Groundhog Day. It feels just like you wake up and you're like, Chargers still aren't on, so I guess I'll just scroll through Twitter a bit, go to work, maybe eat some dinner.
You know what really is kind of annoying to me? Like when I'll wake up, especially just like on a Saturday, and I'll want to put on like NFL Network just even to watch a talk show, whether it's Good Morning Football with a different crew or even NFL Total Access. And the thing that will piss me off the most is when they are playing replays of last year's games.
Yep.
Because it just reminds me it's still not back yet. This
is what we have
to sit through.
What's worse than that is when you're at the gym and then the screen that you chose on the elliptical machine is the one that happened to have been frozen on like one frame from the Packers someone else game last year. And literally all you have is a freeze frame of like, I don't know, Rodgers' backside for 30 minutes while you're doing elliptical. So not only are you not watching live football, you're watching a filmed like rerun that has been frozen and has not been fixed.
So instead of having to hear about everybody talk about Aaron Rodgers for the past 4 months, now you just look at a screenshot of Aaron Rodgers for 30 minutes.
One day I did, and I was not happy. But I was in too deep. I'd already started. I was done.
Nice plug, by the way, to basically explain that you saw that in a gym and to say that you are back to going to the gym again. Very nice.
Boy, do I need
Nicely
this.
done.
Yes, I'm trying to catch up to you, my friend. You are swole beyond belief, and I'm trying to get on that Hefner train.
It's not a good train to get into, dude.
Maybe not after your vacation. You may have gained a few pounds while on that. How was that?
Oh, it's fantastic. Vegas was awesome. 3 days of just remembering what it was like to be in a normal situation. It was great.
Best thing you ate. Before we get into position battles, which we're going to be talking about today, plot twist, we're going to be talking about tight ends, but best food you ate while in Vegas.
You know, this may surprise you given just the lavishness of Vegas and where me and my wife were at. But, you know, my wife and I are big time foodies, and especially just for her, she loves just good Mexican food. And normally she's a fiend for taquitos. So we went to what I thought was still tacos and tequila. Obviously, this shows you how long it's been since I've been to Vegas. And they replaced it with Diablo's Cantina. So
with the bowl?
Not with the bowl. No, not with the bowl. But
I'm thinking of that like barbecue place. My bad. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's all good. So my wife got taquitos for dinner, but these weren't like the run-of-the-mill, type of basic taquitos. I mean, these meat in these things were marinated. They were taken care of. I mean, these did not taste like your regular taquito. So my wife enjoyed that. I enjoyed the Diablo triple layer quesadilla. It was fantastic. Now, on the flip side of that, Dan, if you want to talk about the worst stuff that we ate, that was on the last night when we actually went to Public House, which is basically like a sports bar, so to speak. My wife and I will always love going to Carl Strauss just to share bar appetizers. And man, dude, we got a giant pretzel. We got the pepperoni mozzarella sticks. We got the garlic fries. And then there was, I can't remember one more, but that's basically all we shared. And the giant pretzel, no joke, was literally this big. So that was a carb load night, and that was our last night there, and we went out with a bang.
And then coming back home on a plane with that in your stomach, I'm sure that was wonderful.
It just made the day that much more excruciating. Yeah.
Well, while we are talking about excruciating times, with these, 2 weeks left before training camp starts, what better way to spend some time than talk about some of these position battles? We've already talked about one. And honestly, Jake, I completely forgot who we talked about last. Who we talked about last? What position?
My friend, we talked about the interior defensive line. It was not that long ago. It was not that long ago. I know you've been doing a lot since then, and so have I, but come on now.
Okay, so moving on from interior defensive line, we're going to talk all about the tight end position on this episode. And before we get into kind of the position battles, who's on the roster, Jake, I think it's kind of smart that we take a moment and just kind of recap where we are with kind of the tight end position. And, not so long ago, we had a Hunter Henry, who everyone thought was going to be coming back. He was arguably one of the most important free agents that we were trying to get back. He ends up going to New England. A lot of production, lots of storylines there. Hunter Henry's not there anymore. We signed Jared Cook, keep a few other faces. Just on the whole, before we get into like the position battles itself, how are you feeling about the tight end group just this year versus last year going into the season?
Tight end last year was just, it was a very odd position. And that's all the way around. It wasn't even isolated with one player. I think that a lot of us felt like there could have been a lot more production out of that position last year, especially with the type of talent that you had on there. I was really thinking that they were going to employ Donald Parham a little bit more. I know we got to see him sparingly, especially toward the end of the season. I really like Steven Anderson for this team. As of right now, I'm really glad that he's still a part of this team. He's a guy who I'm hoping he's going to get a chance somewhere. I know it's going to be tight, especially with the tight end roster that is on this team right now. But I would love any reason to still see him on this roster for 2021. But obviously we'll get to that in a second. But, the tight end group for 2020, it wasn't necessarily overwhelming. I just think that we had a little bit more expectations from it, obviously with Hunter Henry's aspect and the contract that he was looking for, the payday that he was looking for, that we kind of knew was coming. We were hoping for somewhat of a hometown discount. You and I went through the contract breakdown, and we had what the rest of the league was at and where logistically where it made sense for him given the way that the market was. And to his credit, he got his money from a team who was just throwing money as if it was, as if the currency was ending tomorrow.
And throwing money and he was a second tight end signed.
Yes, he was the second tight end signed by the New England Patriots. So good on Hunter Henry for getting his money. You can damn well be sure that his numbers should be going up in New England with whether it's Cam Newton, or whether it's Mac Jones that's starting over there. He's going to get his. That's for damn sure. And then the biggest other piece of the turnover puzzle that you had from last year was you had Virgil Green, who was all your reliable as far as a blocking tight end goes. I know he went down last year with that very unfortunate injury when he caught the touchdown in the end zone.
Great catch too, man.
It was fantastic catch. But other than that, you bring back obviously Donald Parham, which everybody was very excited after the Chargers had signed him.
Chicken Parham, baby.
You bring him back after the Chargers had initially brought him on from the XFL. A tight end with his type of size, I'm very excited to see what a year two is going to look like in this system. And again, under the tutelage of what Brandon Staley is going to bring to this offensive unit. And you bring Steven Anderson back, as I mentioned. So a little bit of turnover has happened. Again, you replace a Hunter Henry, as you said, Dan, with a Jared Cook. So there's actually a lot to break down here because it may not seem it may not seem like there was too much turnover, and it may be a position that I think last year was, again, not necessarily underwhelming, but maybe underutilized, or maybe just didn't live up to the expectations that we hoped that it would be. However you want to take it. But I think this group is actually poised for a rejuvenation, especially with the free agent priority that the Chargers put into it, and of course the priority that they put into it in the draft as well.
It's interesting because I think there were a lot of Chargers fans and folks who were covering the team that were a little disappointed when Hunter Henry left. And I think what made Hunter Henry so valuable to this team was he was very good. He was very good at many things, whereas there are other players on teams and on this team who are very good at specific things. He was kind of a jack of all trades for the tight end position. The unique thing about what this Chargers roster has done is they have taken what Hunter Henry does well as one person, and I think they have spread that out across their tight end roster via free agency and the draft. So when we look at, for example, like as a pass catching tight end solely, Hunter Henry may be a little bit more, I don't know if reliable is the right word, but like I think his catch percentage is a tad higher than Jared Cook's. But Jared Cook, I think, has more of the flash plays, has more of like yards per catch. And if you look at the statistics of those two, just those two as a pass catching, they are, for how much money that we would have had to spend to go after someone like a Hunter Henry, like it would have been, I don't know if it would have been worth it. Like the last couple of years, 650 yards, 613 yards. He was hurt in 2018 and then 580 yards for Hunter Henry. And the most touchdowns he had, rookie season was 8, but the last 3 years that we're talking about, 4, 5, and 4. Go back to Jared Cook the last 3 seasons. He's had 500 yards, 700 yards, and 900 yards, roughly, with 6, 9, and 7 touchdowns for those 3 seasons. So purely from a pass-catching perspective, you could argue we may be better with Jared Cook. You could. Or I don't think there's a drop-off there. In terms of, like, overall totality, what are you going to give for the tight end position? Jared Cook, I think, may actually be more durable than Hunter Henry. Now, then you go to, like, the blocking perspective. That is why Tre McKitty was drafted, bar none. Like, I think everybody talked about it. A little under the radar for most folks who were scouting, ourselves included. But it's very easy to see why they drafted him. So the reason I'm saying this, when we go through these battles for this position, it's going to be hard to see like which one of these guys misses the cut, because each one of them brings something that in totality, the sum of the parts I think are going to be better than what just a Hunter Henry could bring.
Yeah, and I like the way that you put that, because you're almost trying to spell Hunter Henry from the abilities that he brought to the field. Because yes, as far as a pass catcher, and also had the skills to pass block or run block as well. You're trying to spell that, I think, with some of these guys, and to make more of a full tight end group, especially from the receiving aspect. I think they're going to try to round that out with all three that I expect to make this roster. But it was a good point that you made, just as far as just the contract aspect goes, because one can make the possible argument that Hunter Henry he definitely had one of his best seasons as in his career. I mean, his best as far as reception goes, he had 60 for 613 yards. His touchdowns tied the lowest that he's ever had with 4. He did that back in 2017 as well. Again, we were all looking at the bright aspects of this because Hunter Henry came on the scene. While his yardage may have been the lowest at 478, he still put 8 touchdowns up on the board, and actually had his highest average per catch at 13.3. And since then, just gradually, those numbers have started to just go down and go down. 2019 was his best year. This was probably his second best year as far as his stats goes. And for him, he did what he needed to do, and he earned his contract. But then you look at it from Jared Cook's perspective. Like I said, remember that Hunter Henry had 60 catches for 613 yards. Well, Jared Cook had 37 receptions and only was behind Hunter Henry by 109 yards. with almost half the catches. And
his yards per catch, I think, is 3 yards more per touch.
Almost 4 yards better than Hunter Henry was. And he had 7 touchdowns last year. So, I totally get it. The last 3 seasons, he's put up some pretty good numbers for himself, both when the Raiders were in Oakland and obviously during his time in New Orleans. So, I get it. And it's a 1-year deal for Jared Cook. I think for what Brandon Staley has the plan for him in this offense, I definitely think he's going to be utilized a lot the way that he did in New Orleans. I'm sure Joe Lombardi is in his ear right now talking about how they were utilizing him and how they're going to deploy him in this offense. And Jared Cook, I mean, if you want to talk about the one biggest disparity, yeah, it's the age factor. But hell, I mean, there were so many weapons on that Saints team last year. And if Michael Thomas hadn't had the up and down rocky season as it was, maybe Jared Cook numbers would have just, who knows what they would have been.
You could argue that for sure.
Yeah. So I think in lieu of that, the way that the Saints leaned on him, I think you're going to see that definitely in a similar way with the Chargers, especially with, when you look at the weapons that they have right now with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, obviously projected to start on the outside. Right now, we don't know who the wide receiver 3 is going to be. And a lot of people would probably say, okay, well, the next logical thing that makes sense is you look to Eckler for a check down in the flat for a receiving option. I definitely think that this is going to be your next weapon in Jared Cook. I think that Brandon Staley understands the weapon that he is, the capabilities that he still has, and I think that he's going to deploy him in this offense really, really well. And even if it's for a short term for 1 year, I'm hoping to get big results. I mean, not big. Let me just temper my expectations. Not big results. I'm not talking double-digit touchdowns, but serviceable enough results to where you could see his touchdowns reflect what he's done over the past 3 years.
Now, we're going to get into the snaps of each of these tight ends playing, but I think what we're going to see in totality this year is, again, and a lot of this is sometimes apples and oranges. I think the offense is going to look, obviously, very different this year than last year under Joe Lombardi versus last year. And I think the tight end position specifically, I think is going to be a bit more dynamically used than it was last year. So sure, if we were to have signed Hunter Henry back, could he have been more dynamic this season? Probably. But if we're just comparing what we see this season versus last, I think we're going to see more out of the collective group this year than last year. Now, but Jake, before we get into the position battles, because we're going to get into all 4 of the guys that are on the roster, we can't forget this episode is brought to you by our friends over at Manscaped. You could use the code LAFB20, save 20% and free shipping. We did not practice this, but Jake, you and I both are wearing the exact same shirt today. And I don't know how to feel about that.
I guess a little bit embarrassed, maybe. I don't know.
Full disclosure, we did start this podcast and our hats were both turned the same way. And we're like, can't do that. We can't do this. This is too weird.
No.
But yes, if you're looking for any type of grooming needs for, honestly, they call it Manscaped, but I think it could also be Womanscaped because I think it can go both ways. You can use these. Your friends could use these. Your family could use these. Shop. Use the code LAFB20, save 20%. You can get all kinds of goodies. Manscaped, check them out, friend of the show. Speaking of parts, let's talk about tight ends.
Never get sick and tired of hearing you talk about Manscaped, but yes, let's talk about tight ends.
Proceed.
Take it away, Dan. Take it away.
Okay, fine. Here we go. So now that we've gotten the Manscaped and tight end part out of the way, let's talk about the position battle that is the tight end. So we have 4 on the roster right now, Jake. We've got Steven Anderson, we've got Donald Parham, we've got Tre McKitty, and we've got Jared Cook. Before going into the battles, how many will be on the roster week 1?
I really hate the answer I'm going to give. I mean, again, just from a number standpoint and for the roster standpoint, obviously it makes sense. Has it been done before with the Chargers? Have they kept more than 3? Yes. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I would really hate to lose Steven Anderson. I really would. Even if he ends up being fourth on the depth chart, I just really like the way that he plays football. And I think that he has a little bit of that unlocked potential for what he can bring, whether we're talking blocking or pass catching. We've seen flashes of that. We saw it last year. I would really like to see him stick on this roster, even if it's for plays that he ends up having to make on special teams. Who knows? But I think that when it comes down to it and you look at all the roster spots that are probably going to be needed, the biggest one here, I mean, obviously everything that's going to affect this is going to be how many wide receivers you're going to keep. And there's plenty of competition for who's going to take over the wide receiver 3, 4, and 5 spots. And then how many running backs are you going to keep? That's another position that outside of Austin Eckler, there's going to be a lot of fluctuation there. So both of those roster spot or position groups are going to have a direct impact here. So right now, I'm going to say logistically, it makes sense that there's only going to be 3 that make this roster. And that is Jared Cook, Donald Parham, and Tre McKitty.
Now, the one thing I will say, and this is going to be the disclaimer, which I think could kind of change the tide, is I think those 3 positions, running back, tight end, wide receiver, I think who's going to make this team when you get kind of towards the bottom of each of those positions is going to be who can play multiple roles. Like who is going to be that special teams ace? Who is going to be the one that can help on other things than their position? So I think if Steven Anderson is going to make this team, he has to show out on special teams during training camp. I think that's the only ticket in. If he can't do that, I just don't see it. But let's talk about it. So tight end 1, I think both of us agree. Actually, I think we agree. Jared Cook, tight end 1.
No, I haven't objected. Yes, it's Jared Cook. Yes.
Okay. Well, no, because some people are very high on Donald Parham. Like,
hey, I think, and so am I. You and I have both been high on him since we acquired him last year. But, I think that there is still just a plan that's in place. Again, Jared Cook's only signed to a 1-year deal. Do I think that that's going to keep Donald Parham from progressing and making an impact for this roster? No, I don't. I think that they know what they have with him. And like we've seen thus far from audio clips from Staley and what we've heard from other players just talking about OTAs and practices, he's going to put them in the best position to win. So if that is indeed true and ends up coming to fruition here, which it sounds like it will, then I don't see how you hide a guy that has those type of physical attributes from not being on the field.
One of the things that I think is Joe Lombardi, but Brandon Staley said it too. He wants to put playmakers in the position to make plays. One of the things that I think was kind of frustrating, but also kind of obvious, and it was just, I don't know, kind of vanilla. You never really saw Hunter Henry like in a playmaking position. Like, did you see him outside the numbers once? I don't think I ever remember him starting out outside the numbers. Like, I will guarantee you Jared Cook is going to line up outside at some point this season. Donald Parham, I think I can guarantee he's going to line up outside. Put him in goal line, one of them's going to be outside. I think you're going to see a lot more stretch the ball downfield, like seam routes, things like that, in corners, posts, things like that. You didn't get that a lot from the tight end position last year. A lot of that was because they were trying to kind of keep things under control for both kind of the offensive line that wasn't really doing well, kind of help protect, also kind of keep things up front, give some assistance if they needed to kind of roll out. But I think this offense is going to look a little bit more, I don't know, lethal might be the word, where you're not just going to see, you're not going to see I don't think you're going to see as many 5-yard stop routes. Like, you're not going to see a tight end go 3 steps, turn around, and just hope that he catches the ball. Like, I think you're going to see more like effort to get them and their playmakers in positions. And I think the 2 that are going to do that, those playmakers in terms of catching, receiving, Donald Parham, Jared Cook. Who do I want catching more? I think the volume I would like to go to Jared Cook. But if I want one of them, if I want a playmaker outside, 30 yards, whatever, I think I'm going Parham.
Yeah, and I understand why. I mean, again, Donald Parham, for as much as we saw about his potential and the clips that we saw from him at the XFL when we signed him and getting excited about it, and rightfully so, honestly, he was very underutilized last year. Very underutilized. And I know you had Hunter Henry there, and he definitely got the bulk of the volume. Conversely, Donald Parham got 10 catches for 159 yards, 3 touchdowns on 20 targets. 20 targets, and that's what he did with 20 targets. Imagine what he could do if you doubled that. Imagine what you could do if you tripled that. It's a nice thought to have. So what he did in a very limited, with limited opportunity, he actually performed very admirably on. And we've already read quotes from, as you had mentioned, Dan, from Joe Lombardi. He likes what he's seen thus far from Donald Parham. And I think he even talked about unlocking the potential that he could possibly have just as a tight end. And again, it's for a guy that's 6'8", that moves like that catches like that. Like, give me a break. I mean, you know what it kind of reminded me of? And this is going way back a little bit, and I only compare this just because of similar sizes, only 2 inches shorter. But remember Ladarius Green?
Yes.
This guy reminds me a lot of Ladarius Green for his physical attributes, how he plays the tight end. He's a very athletic, tall tight end. And again, if he can put it together, if you can truly unlock this kid's potential and just give him, as they say in baseball, just give him more opportunities, give him more bats, and he's going to get you X amount of hits. You can double or triple Donald Parham's targets this year based off of what he did last year in a very limited role. You could have something.
I agree. Now, I think it's pretty clear if we're looking at the snaps for rushing the football, I think we would both agree that that's where Tre McKitty is going to shine this year. That's probably where you'll see most of his snaps. The one thing I will say, we had Tre McKitty on Chargers Unleashed earlier this offseason. If you haven't seen the interview, check it out. He was amazing. First off, he has huge hands. Like, there was one point, Jake, I remember that we were like doing the interview, and I think he raised his hand for something. I'm like, oh my God, his hands are like bigger than his head. So you look at kind of the athleticism that he brings. Like, if you go back and look at the tapes and go back to listen to what the coaching staff was talking about him during mini camps, I think he's kind of a sneaky pick if there was one tight end who I think has the most upside that can kind of change the narrative a bit for what they're going to go to, I think it's Tre McKitty, because everyone talks about, us included, oh, he's going in there because he's going to be a run blocking tight end. Like, we know that. But I think the reason why this coaching staff got him was obviously that, but I think he has the athletic traits to do more. There are some tight ends you see that just, they run block, that's it. And you're okay with that. I don't think that's what they saw in him. So he's a sneaky pick that I can see taking up more snaps than we would initially think for that position.
Yeah, I think the word that you used for Tre McKitty, just describing it, as far as like the sneaky pick, I think is the fair word for him, because I know a lot of people weren't necessarily confused about the selection with him in the fourth round when he was taken. I think maybe just at the time, not a lot of people understood it. And like you said, Dan, it was because of the fact that he unfortunately was underutilized during his college time, and that was due a lot to bad quarterback play. But as you mentioned, the hands, if you can go back and you can find the catches that he has made, especially if you go back to Senior Bowl week, one-handing it in the middle of routes. Yeah, I was just like, okay, so a guy who's very raw in his route running abilities, known more for his blocking type scheme, hey, you put the ball out there, he's got more than enough capability to catch it. And we always talk about certain articles on this show or certain sites, and you can take them for what you will, and you don't have to report them as gospel at all. But Bleacher Report actually had chosen Tre McKitty as their surprise rookie, your favorite word, Dan, gem for the Chargers for this year. And that is strictly just based on, his physical capabilities and what he could ultimately develop into. Now, I don't know unless he makes some big jump between now and the beginning of the year to show me something that's going to outperform the physical pass catching abilities of both Jared Cook and Donald Parham. I still think for this rookie season for him, I think he's going to do what he does best, which is blocking people, clearing the routes, or putting people on their ass. I think Tre McKitty is the long-term solution to this team. Depending on what happens with Donald Parham, you may just end up having your 1-2 punch of the future being Donald Parham and Tre McKitty, and both of them getting better and better over time. Who knows?
It's going to be... I'm excited about the tight end group because I think, in short, we're going to see more from the tight end group than we did last year. And I think we're going to see more athleticism from the tight end group than we did last year. And is there one tight end that can do all of what Hunter Henry could have done for us? I don't know. I don't think so. But I honestly, I truly believe that the ceiling for the tight end group is higher this year than it was if we were to have had Hunter Henry. I think our playmaking ability is higher with the tight end group we have now. Would you agree?
With Donald Parham with another year under his belt and with basically replacing Jared Cook with Hunter Henry, if you're going strictly off the numbers, then yeah, you can make that argument. I think the other factor you have to put into it is the coaching scheme is going to be a lot different. I think all position groups, as far as the offense goes, are going to benefit from this new coaching scheme that's coming in here.
That's true. That's true. And this is not a show in which we are sitting here dogging Hunter Henry as if he was not a good player. He is going to be a good player for New England as well. We liked Hunter Henry. We wanted the Chargers to re-sign him up to a certain price tag. For the money, I think I like the value of our current tight end group at its current price point than what it would have had to have been if we wanted to add Hunter Henry. I think that's kind of where I stand.
You have to look at it like this. Dan, you said it perfectly. I'm not knocking Hunter Henry. I'm not saying that he wasn't worth the money, but just think about this. If Hunter Henry is on this roster today for either the contract that we thought that he would be demanding around that, what was it, 12.5 million around, or even what he got from New England, you have to think to yourself right now that Mike Davis is not on this roster. Corey Linsley may not be on this roster, or any other of the big free agent signings that the Chargers ended up doing.
I think technically they could
lose the others.
They technically could have, because they have the cap space for it, and I can already hear the heathens talk about, they could have gotten both. Why do you have to be cheap?
It's not about free agency, because everybody thinks that anybody can sign anybody, and that the cap doesn't exist. Unfortunately, at some point it does. This isn't the New York Yankees, and it's not baseball.
Nope.
That there is that. So, and what you know from the GM and how he likes to do his contracts, you should already know that it's not necessarily that he doesn't pay anybody to long-term contracts, because he put that notion to bed last year.
Yep.
But you just have to take into account in thinking that if you wanted to pay the money that Hunter Henry got from New England right now, most likely you probably weren't going to be able to pay a Mike Davis or a Corey Linsley.
You could have, but I don't think it would have been the smart buy. I don't think long-term it would have made sense to me. I think there are free agents next year that are going to have much higher ceilings than what Hunter Henry could give you. And that's not any dog to Hunter Henry.
And that takes the conversation even further, because if you wanted to start talking about next year's free agents, okay, who is that impacting you now that you're gonna want to re-sign? and that's going to limit how much cap space that you're going to end up having next year. Thankfully, the cap room is going to go up. Remember, this year was the first year that it went down in a long time. So we were already limited from that standpoint. But one signing can in turn affect three others, or what you want to do for next year in terms of how much cap space you have. So
I don't see us, for example, I don't see us getting Keenan Allen as in his current contract, then getting Hunter Henry for that $12.5 million. And then, you hear all the pipe dreams about Devontae Adams, which probably isn't going to happen. But let's just say that he's a free agent next year and he doesn't get signed by the Packers. Like, we're not doing that if we had Hunter Henry at $12.5 million. Like, that's like that's almost $50 million. That's more than $50 million to the tight end group, or just to two receivers and Hunter Henry. That's probably closer to $60 million, which is insane. It's just not going to happen. Go. So we haven't talked much about Steven Anderson. So I guess the question for you on him, what will it take for him to beat out either of the – he's not going to beat out Jared Cook, obviously. I don't think he's going to beat out Parham. I mean – it sucks because as much as I like Steven Anderson, he kind of seems like the odd man out, and I wish that wasn't the case. Like, I kind of hope that he can show out on special teams because I think he brings something to this roster. But if you had to ask me right now, which of the tight ends in this group of four do I think we need the least? As a tight end, I think it has to be Steven Anderson, and that kind of sucks to say.
Mm-hmm. Steven Anderson was the guy who stepped in as the team's primary run-blocking tight end when Virgil Green went down last year.
True.
And, he was released for, I can't remember exactly when he was released following the end of last season, but he was only gone for a short period of time because then in late March, they ended up bringing him back. And obviously, I can't recall if there was their contract disparity, if they ended up bringing him back for less. I can't remember the particulars on it. But he is just one of those, to me, he's more like an H-back, to where he's one of the guys that just like is capable of doing it all. I mean, he has the pass catching and bit capabilities. He's shown more times than one that he's more than capable of being a good run blocking tight end. And unfortunately, what he has in front of him are, a draft investment coming into his first rookie year, a veteran free agent presence at tight end who has put up great numbers over the last 3 seasons and is going to be utilized in a high priority fashion, and a second year potential gem, as you like to call him, Dan.
Athletic freak.
What could be next. So this just sucks because Donald Parham, to me, could be a tight end 2 on any team in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Any team in the NFL. And that's strictly just for his capabilities. Whether he would end up being, catching the ball or just being a team's primary run blocker, to me, he could be an easy tight end 2. He should be able to make anybody's roster. Unfortunately, he just has 3 guys that the team not only has invested in, but, can do things just a little bit better than he can right now. And even, talk about durability. He played in all 16 games last year. He had 3 starts, finished the year.
He showed some glimpses too. Like some of the flashes he had some pretty good plays along the sidelines last year. Like, didn't he truck someone? I believe I remember him trucking somebody.
Yep. Didn't put anything in the end zone. Had only 106 yards. 13.3 yards per reception. So nothing like historic that's going to blow your mind in 3 starts for the season. But I just think that this guy is the consummate type of versatile player that normally you would see the Chargers holding on to because of their versatility that they would bring to a position. Unfortunately, I just think that there may just be too much of a logjam ahead of him to where he just doesn't make this roster. Again, one can be hopeful if there is a tight end 4 spot that the Chargers do end up having at the end of the preseason. Steven Anderson more than deserves that spot, in my opinion. But you have to measure that now against the rest of the offensive positions, because there's a lot of guys that are gunning for a lot of roster spots, especially on the offensive side of the ball, both at running back and wide receiver. And both of those are going to impact how many tight ends you end up keeping.
It's true. It's true. So it's going to be a fun position battle to watch for. And I think the part that's going to make or break it is going to be the impact that it brings to special teams. So look, if you don't see Steven Anderson's name come up during special teams talks, I don't think that's a good sign for him. So that's the tight end group that we've talked about. We're going to get into some more breakdowns in future episodes. Jake, is there anything we want to talk to the good people of Chargers Unleashed listeners other than thank you for tuning in? If this is your first time, welcome. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes, podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I think that's it. Anything else we want to talk about?
I was just going to say, other than everything that you just spouted off, which is great, be patient, hang in there. We're all going through this. What is it? What's the word that I would use? I guess football withdrawals is probably the best way to put it right now.
100%.
It sucks. It sucks. It really does. But we've got 3 weeks to training camp, and I think, nine Sundays until the regular season starts that's remaining. Like I said, I have never wanted preseason football back as much as I do this year. Nobody cared about it last year, even though it was a truncated season due to COVID and the pandemic and the fact that they just weren't going to have that due to the unpredictability. Hey, I get all that, but how much do you want to see it now?
I'll see anything. Give me anybody in pads. I'm cool with it. For Jake Hefner, myself, Dan Wolkenstein, you can find us on Twitter at Jake T. Hefner, at Chargers Homer, and of course at LAC_Unleashed. Give us a follow, give us a review, and we will see you next time. Hopefully, I'll be a little bit better shape. Jake will have all the carbs gone from his system. We'll have some Brewery X in our systems, and we'll be feeling much better, won't we?
Yeah, one can only hope, but no guarantees.
Let's kind of cut down the Taco Bell intake, huh?
Yeah, that's a hard ask.
That's not going to happen. We both know that. All right, let's wrap it up. For Jake, myself, for LAFB, thank you so much for watching. We will see you next time on Chargers Unleashed.